Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm Daniel Torres. Hello, Efrain Rosario. How are you?
Good, Daniel. Nice to be with you as always.
Great. So a lot that we talk about on this podcast is that dialogue that happens between the consumer and the brand, because obviously the information that both parties get from this conversation is super important. So Efrain, I wanted to ask you, in the big brands that you've worked in, how does that dialogue work from the brand side?
That's a great question, Daniel. It can happen a variety of different ways, but I would say one of the ways that I'm probably most familiar with and is pretty much used by all brands, big and small, is market research, right? And that tends to serve as the primary conduit for that two-way communication.
And how does that work? Because I know that you have qualitative research, quantitative research.
Yeah, and it's good to you kind of have to have a mix of both, right? So I think the simple way to explain it is qualitative research is exactly that, which is that it's more in depth, but it's not something that you would use, for example, for like deep statistical analysis, right? So it's really going in depth to understand what's going on around consumer behavior. Whereas quantitative is larger in scale, right? So you're talking to not one or two individuals, but you're talking to hundreds, if not thousands of individuals and getting a sense as to what's happening across the masses, if you will. And you really need to have a combination of both.
And now I'm starting to understand it better because it's bringing me back to my university days. I was a sociology major, so it reminds me of the comparison between statistics and anthropology, for example.
Absolutely. So that's a good way to think about it, which is statistical analysis versus like ethnography or anthropology.
So to solve this challenge, our guests Ester and Hakan from Bolt Insight have a solution that does just that. The scale of quantitative with the depth of qualitative research with their AI-powered platform.
This is Hakan. I'm the CEO at Bolt Insight. My background is actually in marketing. I used to work at Unilever for around 14 years across different geographies and categories. I've led brands and categories. I started my career back in Istanbul, Turkey, did regional jobs. I used to look after Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, but also Africa and Middle East and Turkey. Then back in 2015, I moved to UK for more global roles. I used to lead the snacking category and then moved to styling under personal care, hair category. And former to joining Bolt, I've done also a bit of general management roles around business transformation, multifunctional transformation across Unilever to make it more efficient and future-proof. And now at Bolt, I'm obviously leading the team and the strategy and bringing from a client perspective, bringing that marketing and client side to what we do so that we don't only just provide data, but more like insights and actionable learning, because we kind of been there, done that in terms of responding to our clients. Very nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Hakan. Esther, would love to hear about your background and what you're doing at Bolt as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's lovely to be with you. So my background has always been in insight and innovation. I spent part of my career agency side. I started at Nielsen, worked both in Europe and in Asia Pacific. I was based in Tokyo for a couple of years. And then most of the second part of my career was client side. So I worked at Reckitt, and then Unilever, where I met Hakan. We're actually partners in crime. I was CMI, I was marketing. And at Unilever, I worked in innovation excellence for foods and then personal care, always in global. And I joined Bolt in 2021. I'm heading innovation. And my work is keeping the customer at the front and center and create great products to advance technology research practices in their organization. So it's lovely being with you today.
Esther, Hakan, nice to see you guys again. Great to reconnect. I'm curious to get your perspectives now that you've both of you can speak to this, having been at a large multinational FMCG company and now pivoting to more of an entrepreneurial type role with Bolt Insight. Would just love to hear your perspective in regards to how that transition has been and how do you compare those two experiences so far?
Yeah, very good question. I might start. I have to admit, the first 3 months was a big change. It was quite impactful, to be honest. Working in a big corporate inside that bubble for many years was a very different experience. I learned a lot from a big corporate, obviously. You know the guidelines, you know how to approach things. You're being taught, born and bred in that, corporate training in a way, and you know how to approach things. But moving on to the entrepreneurial side was also a very good journey, and I learned a lot personally. I wasn't ever a typical, standard corporate person anyway. Usually, all the teams I joined, I've been called the crazy kid in town. I like to innovate stuff, and I was always the kind of entrepreneur inside the big corporate. But moving on to a startup, entrepreneurial world, external world, the beauty, especially within our industry, is the beauty of working with different companies, different industries, is that you get fed with very different perspectives. I realized actually I learned a lot at Unilever in FMCG, but at the same time, it gives you only kind of one perspective. Working with now tech companies, construction companies, smaller SMEs and startups, consulting firms, gives you a very wider perspective. And I was like, wow, now I can see the different perspectives coming from different companies. Personally, it helped a lot for my, personal development.
Yeah, it has been a crazy ride in a sense. And I still remember how it was all started. We had a chat, right, Hakan, back in 2016, and I was about to go maternity leave, and he approached me. What he said, I have an insane idea. And I was quite used to those from our brilliant times working together. And we had a half conversation at the time. But it was about to, it was enough to fire me up.
Planted the seed.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, he's to his point, he's the crazy kid in town, right? So
I'm trying to funnel those ideas. Taming them too much. But I had to take some time off at that time, and then came back to work, but the chat stayed with me, and here we are now. So it has been a transition, because already at the time we were working for this fantastic organization that was definitely at the forefront of consumer connection. Consumer centricity was a philosophy everybody was living by, but we saw this opportunity to make it easier. And I feel like now we are on this side, we can impact so many more organizations, driving those principles and those ideas to many clients, and really trying to help them, because many clients struggle to fix innovation, communication, while those could have been better in the first place if they were built with higher consumer empathy. So we're trying to give them those tools that remove potential barriers to strive for that empathy, and making connecting something that everybody can look forward to. So in a sense, for me, it has been a very positive time in which I really can feel the impact of what we do.
Yeah. Because you guys are also in the market research sector, a space ripe for innovation, no? I mean, maybe Hakan, what was it that you saw in this category, in this segment, that you thought, hey, there's something I can do here and make an impact?
Yes, Daniel. I think the biggest shock I had while I was doing, innovation marketing was, almost everybody comes from, I have to say, some sort of privileged backgrounds, like good universities, getting graduated, getting started into their these nice and fancy jobs in these big corporates doing marketing. And it's the shiny, nice world, right? Living in big city, big, almost ivory towers, we used to call these big offices, but trying to sell mass products, right? to very different profiles of consumers. The problem is marketeers don't connect with their consumers as much. The average in FMCG is actually twice a year. You know, how can you be really consumer-centric, understand your consumers, and create the right products and services to them by just connecting to them twice? That was the main thing that we and I wanted to solve, to be honest. And personally, you know, when I was doing my brand roles, I was always trying to do as many connections as possible. But there are also some constraints, right? There's always not enough time or budget or other priorities. It always gets kind of deprioritized. So there's actually one statistics, another one which is interesting. In big corporates, actually only 20% of the decisions are made with actual consumer data. A lot is still, you know, being made through experience, gut feel, or just, you know, you pick one and move on. Of course, there is the element of, you know, Pareto rule, 80% right rather than precisely wrong, as one of my bosses used to say. But obviously, becoming more consumer-centric helps with the success of these innovations. Another data is actually 80% of the product innovations launched, they get delisted within their first 2 years. To me, that's stunning. You know, it's a big churn. A lot of companies, a lot of people behind these innovations, working day and night, launching products. Imagine just to see that they get delisted in the first 2 years. The problem is also organizations are not set up in the right way, because most of these people don't even stay as long in their roles to see the success of their products. They move on to another brand, they move on to another category. So the success KPIs are actually not the success of the products. It's around how many products you launch, how quickly you put it into the market, how many projects you have in an innovation cycle year. So it's a bit of a broken system in that sense.
Efrain, you deal with a lot of data in your job. And in this time of omnicommerce, do you sometimes find yourself really not sure with what actions to take?
Absolutely. I think as the amount of e-com performance data only continues to grow, a lot of brands are going to face this challenge.
Well, you should check Commerce IQ. They're a pioneer that are helping consumer brands win in e-commerce by optimizing digital shelf and helping grow market share by driving real-time incrementality for retail media and maximizing Amazon sales, share, and profit.
Sounds really intriguing. How can people find out more?
Well, you should join the hundreds of FMCG brands that are already winning in e-commerce with Commerce IQ. It's as easy as visiting commerceiq.ai/FMCG guys or following the link in the show notes to schedule a demo and download their free AI-powered Chrome plugin to optimize your Amazon listings. Don't miss out. Take action today to unlock your AI-powered e-commerce success with Commerce IQ.
It's interesting you mentioned that point, Hakan. We were having a conversation at work the other day around success metrics, and we were calling out exactly what you described, which is that in a lot of places, in a lot of situations, we tend to focus on executional KPIs and not the impact KPIs, and making that distinction is really, really important.
Absolutely, I can't agree more. Because also, as I said, people don't stay in those roles as long enough, and they just focus on that years. So the focus is has quite a short span. We just focus on that year, and usually the growth is coming from either the initial shelf impact of launching some products or the previous year's products that are growing in that certain year. But your impact is actually seen 2-3 years later, but people don't stay as long. And then it's a big debate. What is the actual success criteria?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys have obviously worked in a very admired company, generally in terms of Unilever, but I think specifically are in the areas of innovation and insight. So for those in our audience who are maybe a little bit less familiar with the innovation function, can you give us a little bit more background in terms of how it typically works at some of these large companies?
Yeah, sure. So largely it really happens in different shapes or forms, but I would say there are maybe two main philosophies. So one is the funnel approach, in which you start with a big trend or a growth space, and then ideate on a large scale, start filtering down to get to a lower number of promising ideas, prototypes, and then products that fit a concept. And finally, you launch a product in market. So the disadvantages of this is that you just focus on the next step of the process. So as we were saying before, it can be kind of reactive and spend most of the money at the start in big sweeping initiatives to engage larger team. And then as the time passes, you might encounter some roadblocks that you haven't expected. And so it's not really the most efficient way. And that's why another approach that's been emerging in the past year is the one that is more focused on design thinking, that really puts consumer empathy at the center of the process and starts really small. So investing small money at first, and while we're not certain about our hypotheses, whether they will be proved, and really conduct experiment to stress test those hypotheses. Understanding risky assumptions, what's the worst that could happen, and really start to thinking forward, thinking down the line, and check first that there is a need for this product. I think this is the most important thing. Innovation doesn't come from an idea that was created in a lab, but comes from what our consumers feel. Does it answer those overt or unspoken needs, those pains and gains that consumers strongly feel at a rational, emotional, and social level? So this philosophy is the one that really fosters continuous consumer closeness to make sure that every step of the way is built on the voice of the consumer, and the consumer almost sits in the room with the marketeer, with the head of insight, which is really the one that we have been working with. And we use also within Bolt when we create our products. What does the customer really need to have his work life going a bit more smoothly, you know?
Yeah, and in general, if we have 20% of decisions decided with consumer data, so 80% of decisions without consumer data, and there's only 2 touch points a year with consumers from FMCG brands, well, then it's quite difficult not to understand what your consumer ultimately is thinking. So I know that you guys have developed, one of the products that you've developed is the Bolt Chat AI. How does this tool bridge this obvious disconnect between consumer and brand?
Yeah, so this was really built on our vision of changing the way brand connects with consumers, as I was saying before, provided them continuous stream of insights to really complement business KPI and getting the consumer at the center of all processes. And the premise of Bolt Chat AI is to match you instantly with the right consumer and get to deeper insights via the power of generative AI. So I know that everybody now is talking about Gen AI, but our tool is really revolutionary because the AI works throughout the process at 3 levels, really. First of all, our clients log into our platform and provide all the requirements regarding their target persona. That can be demographic, the category of test, any advanced targeting. And the objective of the research, what is really the burning question they are trying to find out and they're trying to answer. They can also upload a stimulus for testing, such as an image of a pack or a video of an ad. And then the AI creates instantly a discussion prompt guide for the client to review, approve, or modify. And then there is the second step, which is the one that really takes away those weeks of recruiting consumers, making sure a moderator and translator are there. The platform finds immediately those consumers within your target in a matter of minutes. And then a trained chatbot will run this individual conversation with real engaged consumers real time for 30 minutes individually. The chatbot is trained like a real qualitative researcher. gauging engagement and adapting the conversation, probing deeper when needed, and completing those interviews. And it doesn't matter whether a consumer is ready to chat at 1 p.m. my time or 2 a.m. The chatbot will always be ready and run conversation at scale anytime that the consumer is ready to answer. After those conversations are completed, the transcripts are then fed back into Gen AI and producing a one-pager summary together with compelling verbatim, bringing those insights to life. And all of this happens in 24 hours with an experience that is really seamless for the consumers. Everything happens on their mobile. They don't need to share personal information. Everything is anonymized and is happening in their native language, translated back instantly for the client. So seamless for the client and natural for the consumer.
That's amazing to hear that in terms of particularly the short turnaround time to get that type of research done. If I'm not mistaken, and you guys can speak to this as well from your experience at Unilever, that research can take a minimum that weeks, if not months, to pull off. So to be able to do it in the matter of days is pretty impressive.
Absolutely, Efrain. I must also say, although it can, in some projects replace some of those big qualitative work that, companies do, our actually main aim is how do we enable brand teams, insight teams with a tool that is so agile, cost-effective, and fast, so that they can use it in a lot of those decisions where they didn't have any choice or any alternative, and they had to go with their gut feel. Now with this tool, you can even embed it into your, daily, weekly decision-making, conversations, ideation processes, workshops. You don't need to set these big, you don't need those big projects, big research projects to be able to, get consumer feedback. This is a very agile, quick, direct line to consumers in a way.
Yeah.
You get results in less than 24 hours.
It's almost like consumer empathy on demand in a way.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Or that.
Here's a slogan for you guys. You're welcome.
Free of charge. Free of charge.
Yeah, and also I have to say we get this question a lot in terms of how AI works, and how can it be as good as a professional moderator? First of all, it is improving day by day as it makes more conversations, as we use more machine learning and teach the tool, it gets better and better. Now it can do all those even projective techniques. It is adaptive, responds to people's questions. And there are several AIs working in the background, one moderating the conversation, one becoming a referee, for example, and analyzing the responses given by consumers and telling the AI moderator to actually probe further, for example, or even disqualify the respondent. And it all started, and it's all based on all the manual chats we've done, even before the AI automation was there. We have worked and talked and chatted with consumers, moderating conversations, and then use that information to train the AI to become a good AI moderator. So we internally say it's like generative AI went to college and graduated as a market researcher, moderator. So that's kind of how it works, yeah?
Yeah. And by the way, for the audience, if they want to know more about this tool, we are leaving a link on the show notes. So just feel free to, as you're listening to the podcast, you can pause us and check this out and use it as a complementary tool to learn more about the tool and make the conversation more wholesome if you like. What about the fact checking? So from the data that you get, how do you make sure it's clean, it's representative? Do you have like a system to do that?
Yeah, so we are using a mix of methods. So of course, as a company, we have always prized ourselves on high quality of our data. So now with the advent of AI, we need to be extra careful, of course. So on one side, we make sure that the consumer are authentic. So we have a way to detect whether they're bots, which is becoming really common on research. We are making sure that they are who they say they are. The way we recruit consumers actually is built on behavioral techniques. So we have access, for example, even though it's an anonymized phone, to their behavioral data. So whether they are following certain kind of topics online, influencers, searching pages, so that we know their interests. And then we can ask those questions again to actually verify that they are what they actually say they are.
So you're actually using their online behavior to almost like substantiate just the recruitment of it, but actually saying they're actually doing what they said they're doing in terms of like how they behave. That's interesting.
So having exactly two gateway to check their identity in a sense. And then during the chat, now we have the capability with conversational AI to understand through their conversation again, whether they are in line with the person that they say they were in the screening. The whole screening process is happening also in a two-way conversation, more of a dialogue. And then we are observing also the way they answer throughout the survey. So, for example, they might be engaged and articulated to start with, but then they might lose interest through the second part of the survey. And in that case, we give the chatbot a chance to probe deeper and engage the consumer. But if that doesn't happen, the consumer will be disqualified and will recruit a new one. So our aim is to always find the best person to answer the survey, which doesn't mean a super consumer, but somebody that is ready and engaged and wanting to give their opinion.
And Esther, just a quick follow-up on that. Are you also, one of the things with traditional research is that people say there are professional research respondents who that's just what they do, and they're not truly representative of the actual consumer. Are you doing some of that kind of data checking or fact checking as well?
Yes, I'm glad you asked, because that's the whole philosophy in which Bolt is formed. So we use our own diverse sampling method. We have our own platform powered by our algorithm, and we fit in 19 sources of consumer data. So on top of selected panel, you'll have your social media and programmatic channels, so all these advertising channels mostly happening on mobile. And the data comes in and gets calibrated into our model to check the quality. So again, with this system, the idea is to sense check the data from different sources and make sure that we are coming to the same conclusion. So almost triangulating, and at the same time taking away that repeated professional survey respondent behavior by checking where they're connecting from. So checking IP, for example, not allowing them to answer a survey more than once, and recruiting fresh respondents every time, and also limiting our recruitment incentives. So in most cases, we do not incentivize our respondents, or we do raffles or limited value vouchers to discourage that collection of rewards that we know is a problem in the industry.
Also, I think it's much easier, I would say, to understand the real intent and behavior in a conversational format versus a typical survey where people are force-fed some answers and you just click buttons. It's much more difficult to understand the real, the gap between say and do. Right? Whereas in a conversational format, you can probe deeper, dig deeper into what people are answering and understand the real intention behind. I always give the example of, you ask people about, for example, why would they choose, let's say, electric vehicles? And in a typical survey, you would probably have, sustainability, design, performance, and maybe others, which usually people don't put a lot in that open-ended box. But in a conversational format, when you ask that question, you sometimes get answers like, Elon Musk. And then you probe why, and you see that it's because of the image, because of the vision, because of the fact that he wants to go to Mars, for example. So there's a lot of color and depth and nuances behind some of these answers, which you can get only in a conversational engagement, rather than just asking people to pick one answer from already existing force-fed alternatives.
No, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about understanding the gap between what people say and what they do, and breaking out of the norm, if you will, in terms of how we've always traditionally thought of research, I think is, well, it makes a lot of sense because, like you said, people, in a way, we've trained them to answer questions certain ways. So I think being able to do this in a more effective sort of way makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious to get some examples from you with regards to where you've seen this play out. And I think you mentioned that you guys have been running some campaigns recently around the holiday season that could be really interesting for our viewers or our listeners to hear about.
Absolutely. There are several use cases to use a tool like this. In the end, it's an AI automated qualitative research tool. It's very agile. There are very diverse use cases. Some of the clients, they use it for idea generation, idea exploration, digging deeper into some of the gains that their consumers have. Or some now use it for some early stage creative testing, not to validate, of course, because the sample base is still qualitative, but to get like some interesting gross negatives, gross positive, quick checks, sense checks with consumers. So some of them just submit you can, by the way, submit stimulus into the platform for AI to show and get reactions from consumers. So some use it to test even storyboards for their early stage creative ideas. And in this example, which we'll share, by the way, as part of the notes, we tested the Christmas ads. It's a big topic. A lot of people, still expect to see Christmas ads from their favorite brands. And we tested two separate creative TV ads in UK and two separate ones in US. In this case, the examples were Coca-Cola and M&S in UK, and then Coca-Cola and Amazon in US. And we found out really interesting stuff because, first of all, I think one of the things that we wanted to hear out about was a lot of brands now debate whether they still need big TV ads. We were reading through this article shared by Coca-Cola CEO and some executives. They were saying they invest now 60% of their budget into digital. It was completely the other way around 4 or 5 years ago. The main budget was going into TV and less to digital. But yet, there are still those big moments in the yearly calendar which deserves those TV moments, right? And that's why I wanted to see if that is still resonating with people. And absolutely, yes. There were some very emotional quotes shared by people through this exercise. We've put all these ads. We got people to watch them and share their thoughts, and AI interviewed them. And there were such nice emotional quotes. I'll actually share a couple of them very quickly. Someone was saying, it reminds me of when my daddy was alive and we always had small bottle Cokes with peanuts when opening Christmas presents. These are such important things, I think, for brand professionals to humanize some of the content they create and personalize with the topic. And then you understand the impact of what you are creating. And then another person was saying, definitely feel involved. I feel warm inside, feel like a kid again. It's just an overall great feeling for the holidays. This was a response to the ad from Coca-Cola. And there was an interesting, I think, comment around, you might think looking at the Coca-Cola ads where you see a lot of different Santas, and the topic is everybody can actually become a Santa. And you might think by the book, it might be a bit of a, interesting, controversial approach, but it seems like it resonates very well with consumers. They want to be like a Santa. They want to bring happiness, which is what Coke is about in this case. They kind of relate very well with the Santa and the Christmas spirit.
And one question, how is that fourth dimension between the TV and the consumer broken? So how do you go from running that commercial to the consumer answering the survey?
Yeah, so you can upload your stimulus into the system, in this case, the ad, and then AI takes that and creates the discussion guide accordingly. You can even feed in context to explain that video or visual that you're showing, saying, this is actually a TV ad that was aired for Christmas. So make sure you probe that to the audience and then start asking your questions. So AI is smart in that way, understands what you are trying to do and create the right set of questions, which you can edit and change and add new questions as well. But a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the AI in terms of creating that preliminary discussion guide before the interview process starts.
Got it.
Another interesting thing that we found out was the different approaches between brands to Christmas advertising. So on one side, there is Coca-Cola's Everybody Can Be Santa ad, which shows a lot of different people from different demographic, ethnicities, backgrounds, and it's a much more holistic and diverse approach. On the other hand, a brand like M&S, again, overall, an ad that's liked a lot, but with an approach that is a bit more tapping into child-friendly creative. The thing that we observed was the difference between generations. For example, especially older communities versus Gen Z, we have seen that they have a much higher tolerance in terms of liking these child-friendly ads. They think about their grandchildren, they think about the family. Whereas the younger audience, we found out that they actually quite easily find some of these ads a bit childish for them because they haven't been into that life stage yet where, you know, they would understand and relate to their kids or grandkids. And there were really nice quotes mentioned, like, for example, I look forward to the Coca-Cola adverts coming out every Christmas. It definitely gets you in the Christmas spirit. And this one is what everyone should take notice of. This was a 40-year-old female in UK.
The thing that's interesting about TVC, about TV ads, is that by nature, they're going to play to a mass audience. So, like, to your point, Hakan, there'll be certain subsets of that audience for whom this will resonate more strongly than with others. But generally speaking, I also would think that a lot of companies like the Coca-Colas or the Marks and Spencers of the world are probably, it's a little bit of an and, not or, in terms of the content, right? Because that TVC will probably live in some way, shape, or form in their digital advertising as well, right? At least if, in my opinion, at least if they're doing that properly. So the thing that TVC gets for you is like more that story, emotional storytelling that you were saying, and like that connection with consumers where they look forward to it at this time of year.
Absolutely. How do you use the TV ads to cater to wider audiences, but then how do you still tailor that and personalize through digital channels is where magic happens, I guess. You know, instead of cutting and using the same TV ad everywhere, that's not the game anymore. You need to think strategically in terms of, you know, personalizing that content through digital, because you're not doing mass marketing in that sense. When it comes to digital experiences, you are talking to individuals and they want to see stuff that is 100% relevant for their context.
So a reminder to our audience, we're speaking with Hakan and Ester from Bolt Insight. What's the best way to get in touch with you guys? If some marketer, an FMCG market research person, commercial person even wants to get in touch with you guys?
So we'll definitely leave our emails on the notes, but our website is boltchatai.com. You can reach us through there, or even it's a self-serve platform. They can sign up and start using the tool themselves as well. But definitely, we would love to help and support for any of the challenges they have in terms of becoming a more consumer-centric organization.
That's great. One question for you guys, given that you are on the forefront of a lot of this thinking in terms of both innovation, but also the application of AI in insights, where do you see the dialogue and the engagement between consumer brands and actual consumers evolving to in the next 5 years? Like, how do you see this playing out in that time?
Excellent question. First of all, let me start with AI, and the best, I guess, the best analogy I can provide is AI is like electricity. Everybody has it. What matters is what you plug into it, right? How you use it. So I think even companies, startups, and as well as corporates need to approach it this way. There won't be soon any differentiation around AI. AI will be there for all the companies out there. What matters is what sort of experience you're providing. What is the application of AI that solves real problems? So that's from an AI perspective. From a research perspective, I think the lines between qual and quant will get even further blurred, because the reason why I think quant and the standard surveys that we have in our lives existed in the past was because it wasn't possible to analyze quantitative data, conversational data at big scale, right? That's why we put the questions in that typical multiple choice format with a question and a set of answers, which made it possible for us to analyze later on and give meaningful insights. But moving forward, because it is now possible to analyze conversational data at scale, there won't be the same surveys in the near future. Everything will become more conversational. That's why at Boltchat AI as well, we are now launching higher sample sizes. This week, we are launching the 20. By the end of the year, it will be done with 100 people as well. So it's almost like the scale of quant with the depth of qual. And I think I would encourage all the insights professionals as well to look into all the surveys and quant studies that they are doing and question whether it's really getting the depth as well that is required from these consumer engagements.
Yeah, and maybe something also on my side, maybe moving on from AI and more to research. I would like to see it as a tool for democratization, but on both sides. So I love Efrain when you talk about dialogue, because I think the way brands and consumer will connect in the future will be a two-way dialogue, almost choosing each other and providing authentic, inclusive feedback that needs to be heard in an unfiltered way. And because I think we can see it with the rise of creator and social commerce. We cannot think to indoctrinate consumers anymore or having them to do what we want to do. So we are dreaming of a future where consumer provided feedback in any way they're able or willing to, not forcing them to put ticks in boxes, but helping them texting, having a voice conversation, record a video, a story, sharing, their Fitbit data if they want, and in any case, communicate in a seamless way. And I think also it's important to say that diverse feedback is key. Also moving away from finding consumer where they usually found, but trying to find them where they are, to really give stage and space to all sorts of voices for really inclusive and relevant innovation.
Mm-hmm. You guys have had an amazing career, obviously, having been in the brand side. Now you were crazy enough to go into the entrepreneurial side and being successful as well. So kudos for that. Ester and Hakan, if you went back to the beginning of your career with everything that you've learned until now, what would be that one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Great question. It still seems like yesterday, even though clearly it's not. But
day before yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of days before. But I would say maybe never shy away from an opportunity or discomfort if they can help you learn, or if it can help giving you scope or stretching you. I had a case I remember with a wonderful manager, mentor of mine, in which I had to choose between growing or staying where I was comfortable and delivering. And he always encouraged me to grow out of the things I was comfortable with. And that brought me here. So I think I never looked back. And when I joined the dot, I could see that those experiences that were uncomfortable at first were definitely the ones that taught me the most. And then, of course, for all other women that are in marketing and tech that might listen, to believe that there is a space for you and to take it. I wouldn't have thought at the start of my career that I would be in this space, but I feel now that our voice is needed more than ever, especially in these days. So definitely, for anybody that is looking for advice or mentorship, especially at the start, and they're interested in this space, get in touch with me personally. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have a chat.
Thanks, Ester, for this. Well, how about you, Hakan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as the crazy kid in town, I would say take risks and be brave. I think the biggest problem I see in corporates is that people think their margin of impact is quite small. People come and go, and they kind of maintain what their brands can achieve. But at the same time, there's so many solutions and problems out there that these big brands can solve. And with the power of all these big organizations, from a human side, resources, budgets, there's a lot that that big enterprise professionals can do. So just look out, experience new things, new companies, engage with startups a lot, and see what they are offering. Sometimes it's so easy and comforting to work with those big companies that everybody used to work with for the last 50, 100 years. But there's so much that smaller startup scale-ups can offer to these enterprises as well, because they're at the forefront of innovation and they come up with a lot of solutions. Just be curious, search and take risks. I think results will follow.
This was Hakan Yurdakul and Ester Marchetti from Bolt Insight. Remember that in the show notes you have available their contacts, but as well all the examples that they talked about, like the Christmas ad. Efrain, very interesting conversation. What are your key takeaways from it?
Yeah, absolutely. This was one that was near and dear to my heart as somebody who works in insight. So this was right up my alley. For me, I think it's really fascinating hearing the different elements or perspectives that both Ester and Hakan bring to the party in terms of like that combination of innovation and insight coming together. So you've got the human empathy that you get from the insight part of the world, and then you've got the speed or agility that comes from innovation.
Yeah, and well, first of all, I think that I like the fact that they started a business with a very clear purpose, which is let's fix the way that brands and consumers communicate. I mean, clearly the system is a bit broken. The innovation system is a bit broken. Only 20% of new innovations are based on consumer data, and then 80 of innovations are listed in the first 2 years. So it's a bit of like a zombie 80-20 rule, no?
I think it varies by company. But I think the point is true, which is that, or the point is valid, that there certainly is a need for more communication between brands and consumers. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, there's obviously companies that are probably doing better things and really having more of that dialogue, but obviously others. And we know about all the politics that happen in some companies to drive innovations, no?
Absolutely. And I think also it's about how do you make it easier, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make it easier to be able to have that dialogue? So I think that's what Bold Insight and Hakan and Ester are striving for and are doing today.
Yeah. What other points do you think that are interesting for people to take away from this?
Well, I think to me, it's not just about bringing the depth of qual together with the scale of quant, but I think what's interesting to me was being able to do it close to real time. So the fact that you're talking about getting these insights not in weeks or months, but really days, if not hours, is really intriguing and fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also thought it was interesting that AI, the most important thing is how you use it, no? That it can't just generate stuff for you, but you have to really like be laser focused on how you use it and when.
Well, I believe it was Hakan who said this. AI is like electricity, right? Soon it will become a utility that everyone will have. So to your point, it's really more about not access, but how you use it and how you apply it.
Yeah. Can you get AI electrocuted, maybe?
You probably could get an overdose of it.
Yeah.
Or, I think we're definitely getting a little bit of that from the media these days. But the separating fact from fiction on AI, I think, is becoming a really strong skill that people need to have.
Exactly. Well, this was great to have Bold Insight with us. Thanks again for joining as a listener. Remember, you can follow our content on our LinkedIn page, in which I don't know at the time of publishing, but will be around 10,000 followers, which is something amazing. So thank you all for your support. I don't know if you want to add something, Efrain?
No, I think just as you said, thank you to all our listeners and our audience. You guys are the fuel that keeps us going. So please keep listening and send us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
Exactly. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you in the next week of the FMCG Guys podcast.